Good morning and welcome to Crown Forum. We are honored today to have a distinguished guest, former Secretary of Homeland Security, Jeh Johnson, for a panel discussion this morning. We are excited to have the opportunity to have former Secretary Johnson engage with students from the AUC today, and we have two members of the Morehouse Moot Court team, two members of the Morehouse NROTC program, and two Clark Atlanta University students, one from the graduate program and both from the Honors College there. We'll begin with some introductions of the programs. Then I'll introduce our esteemed president, David Thomas, and then President Thomas will introduce Secretary Johnson, and we will proceed with the panel discussion. Welcome. I want to begin with the coach of the Moot Court team and founder of the only HBCU Moot Court team in the land, Professor Winfield Murray.
Good morning. My name is Winfield Murray, and I have been an attorney with the U.S. Department of Labor, as well as with the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. But the thing that I'm most proud of is that I had the opportunity to establish the Morehouse Moot Court team. The team was founded in 2013. We have gone to the Nationals every year since its inception. In 2015, we won every single round that we competed in and became the national champions. The city of Atlanta actually awarded the Morehouse Moot Court team a proclamation because we were the first African-American team to win the Nationals, the first African-American coach to win the Nationals, and the first historically Black college or university to win. Our students... I think that one of the greatest things about Moot Court is we still are the only HBCU that currently has an undergraduate Moot Court team, and our students go on to be very successful in law school, oftentimes reaching the top 10% of their law school classes. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I'll introduce Captain Patrick V. Fahey, and he will introduce himself and speak briefly about the NROTC program here at Morehouse College.
Good morning. I'm Captain Patrick Fahey, the commanding officer of the Naval Reserve Officer Training Corps. There's 6 schools that make up the ROTC here in Atlanta. Morehouse is a host unit for Morehouse, Spelman, and Clark, and then at Georgia Tech we have Tech, KSU, and GSU. The program here at Morehouse is one of the finest in the entire nation, I believe. It was originally established here in 1987, and since that time, we've had nearly 250 Navy Marine Corps officers commissioned from the program here, many of whom have gone on to become senior naval officers. We currently have one admiral serving right now that's a Morehouse grad. Very proud of the unit here. You'll see that our mission is the moral, mental, physical development of these young leaders, which we believe aligns perfectly with the mission of Morehouse as well. And you can see the 2 gentlemen sitting behind me who will soon be heading off to be Navy Marine Corps officers and serve. They can serve in a variety of functions, be it naval aviators, SEALs, Marines on ships and submarines, but they go serve proudly and they serve their nation and they lead sailors and Marines. So again, very proud to be a part of the program here. Thank you.
Could you introduce the 2
Yes.
midshipmen?
I'd like to introduce Midshipman Billups and Midshipman Whips, 2 of our Marine Corps option midshipmen who will soon graduate and again head out to serve in the fleet, to travel the globe and make a difference just like they do here. Gentlemen.
Thank you. I want to take this opportunity also to introduce the members of our Moot Court team, Tyree Morris and Cameron Smith. Are you a senior, Mr. Smith? Junior and senior, about to go off and become fantastic attorneys. Let me also take this opportunity to introduce the members from Clark Atlanta University, Ms. Christina Williams and Ms. Jamie Beasley. Ms. Beasley is a graduate student in political science at Clark Atlanta University, which is celebrating its 50th year this year, and which was founded with energy and personnel from Morehouse College. So we feel as if there's a synergy here, and as well as Ms. Williams, who is also a member of the Honors College. I don't think we get to do programming with Clark Atlanta University as often as we should, and so I'm really pleased today to have these women with us to do this panel discussion this morning. Now let me introduce our president, Dr. David A. Thomas. He is a PhD in organizational management and higher education leadership, and he has been quite a leader here at Morehouse College as our 12th president, who has increased and accelerated our fundraising potential by leaps and bounds. He's at 190 million and growing. He's also expanded the reach of the college by establishing an online degree program, and he's an international leader in organizational business, having consulted with 100 of the top Fortune 500 companies. He's a renowned author, and we are very pleased to have him, and we are very glad and honored to have been invited this morning to have this panel discussion here at your home. If you don't mind, I'm introducing Secretary Johnson.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Jones, and thank you, participants on the panel. It's a pleasure for me to be able to stand here today and introduce someone who really embodies the mission of Morehouse College, which is to develop men with disciplined minds who will lead lives of leadership and service. And I think that there's no one who embodies that mission in action more so than Secretary Jay Johnson. 1979 graduate of Morehouse College, a long service or record of public service to our country in a number of different roles, the pinnacle of which was his service in the Obama administration as the Secretary of Homeland Security. And I would need much longer than I have this morning to actually describe to you the full scope of what Homeland Security covers for our country. But literally 24 hours a day, it is the organization that keeps us safe from everything from our airports and terminals to what actually happens on the ground here in our country and responding to national emergencies. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it back over to Professor Jones. And again, I want to thank you, Secretary Johnson, for joining us this morning and for being such a light for what Morehouse means to the world.
Thank you.
I second that. Thank you for coming.
Good morning.
Good morning. We're really pleased to have you here to be able to engage with students from the AUC. Thank you. And so I'm particularly interested, just as a start, in what it felt like to be a designated survivor in between the Obama and Trump administrations.
It was a unique experience, put it that way. Let me begin by, first of all, thanking President Thomas, Mr. President. I'm used to referring to people in that way. And Mrs. Thomas, thank you for inviting me into your lovely home. Greetings to the students, greetings to the distinguished alumni around the room, and thank you to the members of the NROTC for the service to the nation you will provide. I have to point out my wife, Susan, is technically a member of the United States Navy. She is the sponsor of a nuclear-powered submarine that she will christen in Newport News on November 13th, the USS New Jersey. It's a really nice ship. I think $3 billion to build this ship. And she is a lifelong member of the crew as a result of being the sponsor of the ship. She hasn't been on her submarine yet, but she will get to visit it. So everybody's fascinated with Designated Survivor. Let me explain. There's a TV show called Designated Survivor. It's not as exciting as the TV show. Let me explain the concept. The presidential line of succession, and you political science students know this, right? President, Vice President, Speaker of the House, President pro tem of the Senate, and then the cabinet in the order of the seniority of their department. And because the Department of Homeland Security is the newest department, I was last in the presidential line of succession, last, number 18. I couldn't die. And you cannot have all 18 of these people in one place. Whether it's a State of the Union or an inauguration, you cannot have all these people in one place in the event of catastrophe. You can't, because it would wipe out our democracy. So somebody among those 18 has to absent themselves from the event to go to an undisclosed location. I got this duty twice. I'm probably one of the few people who did it twice. First was the State of the Union, January 2016. I got sent off to the undisclosed location, and because it's undisclosed, I can't tell you the location. And the second time I got the short straw again was for the inauguration of Donald Trump. Now, I wasn't planning to go anyway, but on Inauguration Day, being the designated survivor is fundamentally different because the whole cabinet is resigning. And that meant that one of us had to stay on until my successor was appointed by President Trump, confirmed by the Senate. So, first time designated survivor, I went to the undisclosed location. It's you go to the place, you get to bring a nice bottle of red wine, and you get to bring the White House chef with you. And when the president's back in the residence, you get to go home. Second time, my wife and I just came home to our house in New Jersey a day early. And that was I could tell you that
was the
location.
undisclosed location.
That was Montclair, New Jersey. There's somebody here from Montclair, New Jersey. And when you're the designated survivor, I had my usual Secret Service detail, plus more security, and a whole lot of other stuff surrounding the house. And then at 7:32 that evening, January 20, 2017, a Friday, my detail leader got the word from the incoming secretary's detail leader, Kelly's been confirmed, Johnson is relieved. And in that moment, I went from, this doesn't happen to too many people, I went from being Secretary of Homeland Security, fourth in line for the presidency, with a lot of entourage and security, to being a private citizen. And I'll never forget the magic of the moment. We were in our favorite restaurant with my two detail leaders, and as soon as they told me I'm free, and that's what it felt like, being free, I said to them, guys, I'm gonna get up from this table and I'm gonna walk out of this restaurant for a walk. And for the first time in 3 years, you're not gonna follow me. And it was wonderful.
Amazing.
Just for fun, I walked on the railroad tracks nearby.
Amazing. We're very impressed with what you've done in your career, obviously as the Secretary of Homeland Security, but even prior to that, your service in government and in private practice has been extremely distinguished. And so we're interested to know how you came to come to Morehouse College and to the AUC. And so I'd like to invite Mr. Smith to ask a couple of questions about how you chose Morehouse College.
Definitely. So good morning again, Mr. Johnson. Firstly, I'm going to ask you, prior to attending Morehouse, did you know that you wanted to be an attorney? And if not, what singular moment showed you or helped you know that you wanted to become an attorney?
I can describe for you the exact moment. It was right here on this campus, across the street. In this respect, I am nobody's role model. I was a terrible student in high school. I was a C&D student in high school. And you're looking at somebody who maybe I shouldn't say this in front of the president of Morehouse College, he might take my degree back, but I never got beyond 10th grade math. I took 9th grade math in 9th grade and flunked. I retook it in 10th grade. I took 10th grade math in 11th grade. I took 11th grade math in 12th grade and flunked the New York State Regents. Somehow, I got into Morehouse College. I didn't feel like I needed to study because I was going to be the left fielder for the New York Mets. And so it was not very important for me to pass math or chemistry or biology in high school because I was going to be playing left field for the New York Mets. I was convinced of that. And I ran, in addition to baseball, I ran track. I came to Morehouse and I wanted to be a baseball player. Didn't make the baseball team. I ran track, but there was another guy named Edwin Moses on my team. And all I saw was the back of his head. And I said, you're not going to be a track star. And one day, in freshman year, my grades, I had a 1.8 GPA my freshman year at this school, 1.8. And one day, right around this time of year, 45 years ago, I was sitting in my dorm. I was a sophomore, fall 1976. I was sitting in the dorm, then Thurman Hall. Now it's called the Learning Center, right? Yeah, you all fixed it up. It looks really nice now. I was there yesterday. I was sitting in my dorm, and it occurred to me, it dawned on me, there's nothing else for me to do but study. I'm not going to be a baseball player. I'm not going to be a track star. I'm not going to be a football player. There's nothing left to do but study. And I think I want to go to law school. And I remember the moment. And my grades improved pretty dramatically. Fall semester of sophomore year, I had a 3.0. I made the dean's list. It helped that my father promised me a car if I got a 3.0. And then spring semester, I had a 3.5. And then the last 2 years of school, I had straight A's, 4.0. And then it was on to law school.
Mr. Morris.
And a lot of that really did have to do with it took a year for it to soak in here for me, but a lot of it had to do with the inspiration, the ambition and the energy and the dedication among the students in this school is contagious. And just being around all these other black men who were dedicated and serious about studying affected me. And so by fall semester, sophomore year, I knew I had to improve my grades and I knew I wanted to be a lawyer.
Mr. Morris.
Former Secretary Johnson, I would like to thank you again for coming. My question to you is, what attracted you to the AUC? And if you could give your freshman self advice, what would it be?
2 questions, 2 answers. So my grandfather was president of Fisk University in Nashville. And my father had grown up on the campus of Fisk. So my father was familiar with a black college. And because I was such a poor student in high school, both my mother and father concluded, they basically made this decision for me and pushed me in the right direction. It was one of the smartest decisions they ever made on my behalf. They decided that I should go to an HBCU. And it was either Fisk or Morehouse. And I came to Morehouse fall of 1974. It helped that it was homecoming weekend. It helped that I got to go visit Spelman too. And it's one of those few times in my life. The other time is when we went out to Montclair, New Jersey to look at homes. She knows what I'm talking about. She's from Montclair. And I said, this is my home. So when I came here to Morehouse in the fall of 1974, something inside me said, this is my home. I belong here. And so that's what guided me to Morehouse. And what was your second question?
And if you could give your freshman self.
Oh, yes, sir, freshman advice. Study, study, study. I mean, that's what you're here for. I mean, of course you're here for the student life, for the real world experience of being around other Morehouse students, other AU students, but just study, study, study. Try not to sleep too late. I was walking around the campus yesterday at about 9 o'clock in the morning. I didn't see a single student on campus. The explanation I received was we were asleep, we were out late. You know, study, study, study. That's the best advice I could offer your freshman year.
So we're in a period of history where things for American democracy feel fraught. And we have a number of issues on the table, racial tension, other political polarization that is causing a lot of us to feel concerned about the democracy. And so we wanted to ask you, as former Secretary of Homeland Security, some questions about some of these issues to get your ideas about what we should be thinking about as Americans and as Black Americans. Ms. Beasley, did you want to?
Well, before you do that, one other thought about Morehouse. This is another life lesson, and then we'll get on to business, promise.
By all means.
My senior year, after I decided I wanted to go to law school, I wanted to go to Harvard Law School in the worst way. And this guy over here, Michael Tyler, a class of 77, he got into Harvard Law School. And I wanted to get into Harvard Law School. He was 2 years ahead of me. I had put all my eggs in that basket, going to Harvard, Harvard, Harvard. And I applied to Harvard, Columbia, NYU, Cornell, and Temple. Fall semester of senior year, before Christmas, I got that thin envelope in the mail from Harvard Law School. We're really sorry. So many great applicants. We just can't fit you in. I was crushed. And I couldn't, for 2 days, I couldn't get out of bed in my dorm. I was crushed. Felt like the world had ended because I didn't get into Harvard Law School. Turned out I got into Columbia Law School, and looking back on it, 40 plus years later, there's probably nothing I wouldn't have done different or more or better had I got into Harvard versus going to Columbia. So sometimes when you suffer disappointment, you have to take the long view. Anyway, sorry. Go
We
ahead.
really appreciate that because in
Because you probably have
promulgating
students all
our
the time
pre-law
come to you
program,
crushed that
everyone
they didn't
wants
get into somebody's law school,
exactly,
right?
and there are
Right.
so many good choices, and we want people to consider their options.
Exactly. Tell them don't put your eggs in one basket.
Yes, please.
Right. Don't buy the decal for the back of the car until you've got into the school. Right. Okay.
So let's talk a little bit. I don't want to run out of time before I sort of do an expanse of questions, and then if we have time, we can come back and speak more deeply about some of these issues. So did you want to start, Ms. Beasley?
Thank you again.
Good morning.
Good morning. So what role does Homeland Security play in curtailing climate change?
In doing what?
In curtailing climate change?
So Homeland Security is 230,000 people, 22 components and agencies. FEMA is part of Homeland Security. FEMA is disaster response. FEMA is also grants, grant making, several $100 million a year in grants dedicated to matters of Homeland Security, including hardening infrastructure. The most concern I have about global warming, climate change, is the effect of severe weather events on aging infrastructure. Levees, tunnels, bridges, shorelines. And FEMA is preventive in nature by hardening infrastructure, but FEMA, of course, also responds to floods, hurricanes, storms, power outages, and the like. And everybody here knows, if you've lived, beyond 15 years, that we're seeing more and more severe, unpredictable weather events, whether it's floods, droughts, storms. And so DHS has that part in trying to address global warming. But ultimately, it's a national and global issue. DHS on its own can't address this.
And what about the tension that's going on in the states today? Ms. Williams, did you want to ask a question?
Yes, good morning and thank you again, Secretary Johnson. Yes, how has COVID-19 and the rollout of COVID-19 vaccinations both in the United States and abroad, how has that impacted Homeland Security?
Well, the effect of the pandemic has been prolonged in this country. We see surges, we see downturns, and then we see another surge, another uptick. The death toll is over 700,000 people now. And this has plagued our nation, has gripped our nation now for more than 18 months. It has required, therefore, a lot of very senior government officials, including the Secretary of Homeland Security, including a number of component leaders, to dedicate themselves to a nationwide response to the pandemic. FEMA is the agency of our government that should be at the centerpiece of any pandemic response. Frankly, we have not used FEMA as effectively as we could have. You know, if we had life to live, hindsight is brilliant. If we had life to live over again, our government should have triggered FEMA on day one to allocate resources and distribute resources on an even basis, rather than having states compete one by one for PPE and masks and vaccines. FEMA should be in a position to distribute those things because FEMA knows how to distribute resources and emergency supplies better than any other agency of our government.
We'll return to some of the aspects of your legal career, but you've spent a significant amount of time at the Pentagon, and we have these gentlemen here who are developing their careers of service.
Hello.
And so I wanted Midshipman Peoples and Midshipman Whips to ask you some questions about the development of your career there and anything that they're interested in understanding about working for the
Did
Department
I
of
hear
Justice.
you two want to be Marines?
Yes, sir.
Lead, follow, or get out of the way, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Good morning, sir. Thank you again for being here. My question is, how do you think recent events such as the Black Lives Matter protests, the George Floyd incident, the January 6th insurrection, how do you think that all play a part in the way that the United States engages in security here and abroad?
That's a good question. I was really impressed by the nationwide response to George Floyd's killing because of for the overwhelming majority, the peaceful demonstrations across the entire country. It gripped the nation's attention. Video has a way of bringing things home, making them very real. Makes you wonder, what did we do before iPhones? There hasn't been an increase in excessive force by the police. There's just been an increase in the ability to capture it on film. Think about all the cases where there was simply a file, a piece of paper and a file. He had a heart attack while being placed under arrest that weren't captured on an iPhone. The demonstrations around George Floyd's death were international. We're in Europe. I worry that the level of intensity and interest may be waning in this issue. And I've been disheartened and disappointed that it's been politicized, that the phrase Black Lives Matter has been politicized and exploited. I read something recently. We've had some anniversaries recently. Several weeks ago was the 50th anniversary of Attica. Some of you are too young to know what Attica is or what it was. September 13th, 1971. Michael Tyler remembers it. You were probably you were a high school student. And some inmates had taken some prison guards captive. The governor decided to storm the prison, and dozens and dozens and dozens of people were killed. In the initial aftermath of the takeover, the news reports were that the inmates had killed the guards, which was totally false. They all died from gunshot wounds by the attack force, including the hostages. But the initial reports were that the inmates had killed the guards. The point of the editorial I read was that fake news, disinformation did not begin with social media. And very often fake news and misinformation has its most adverse impact on people of color. Very often people of color pay the largest price for misinformation here and abroad.
Thank you, sir.
Midshipman Whips.
Good morning, sir. First of all, thank you for being here once again, sir. So my question to you is, what was that experience like transitioning from the civilian world into the environment that is the Department of Defense? And what were some big takeaways or some lessons that you learned while in the Department
Well,
of Defense?
that's a good question. In 1998, I was appointed to be General Counsel of the Department of the Air Force. I'd been a private corporate lawyer in New York City with the firm I'm with now, and President Clinton appointed me to this job. It was a Senate-confirmed presidential appointment, and all of a sudden, overnight, I became one of the civilian leaders of the Department of the Air Force. And in the Pentagon, in the military, as you know, rank matters for everything. Rank matters for how you refer to the person, who takes the phone call first, how you sign your letters and your emails, who salutes who first. It matters for everything. And the civilians have to have a place in that. They have to have a rank. They have to have an equivalent rank. So as one of the civilian leaders of the Pentagon, I all of a sudden became a 4-star equivalent overnight. And I had never worked in the Pentagon before. I was not in the military. So that was quite a culture shock. But it mattered for everything. And I'll never forget, I was at a conference with the Chief of Staff of the Air Force, 4-star. He's like, and he asked me if I would ride in his staff car with him, and as opposed to getting on this bus to go back to our hotel. He said, "Jay, come take a ride with me." This is General Ryan, Chief of Staff of the Air Force. And I think, okay, I got to figure out where I'm supposed to sit in the car because it matters for everything. And I'm thinking, okay, General Ryan's he's a 4-star, but he's really like 4.25, 4 and change. So he's going to sit in the back on the right-hand side of his car. And okay, so that means I'm going to sit in the back on the left-hand side of his car. So I got in the back in the left-hand side of the car, and General Ryan got in the driver's seat. A little embarrassing. But it was a culture shock for me. But eventually, I learned it. So when I was appointed General Counsel of the Department of Defense, I kind of knew what to expect. And then when I became Secretary of Homeland Security and the civilian oversight for the Coast Guard, I had to get used to people saluting me and having a plane and people calling me Mr. Secretary all of a sudden. But, I mean, yeah, it was nice, but it's also a constant reminder of the responsibility and the burdens of the office. Sometimes I'd want to say, no, don't salute me, don't salute me. I don't want to be secretary this morning, but you can't escape it. So, thank you for your question.
So your career has involved law and working for the government. Can we hear a little bit more, based upon the questions of our moot court team members, about the development of your law career and your ability to distinguish yourself there?
Definitely. So there's an interesting fact that our moot court coach is always giving us. It's 5% of attorneys in America are African American. And so we're interested to know how it was being the first black partner at your firm, how it was navigating that space, knowing that you were one of the only faces to see.
It's navigating a white world and succeeding in a white world. I have to say that Morehouse College enabled me to do that because I grew up in a predominantly white world. I grew up in a predominantly white community as a minority, as someone who was part of that 5%. And so the feeling of being an outsider was inescapable, and feeling a little isolated, and feeling as if I had to play the stereotype. When I got here, all of a sudden, I'm no longer in the minority. I'm in the majority. I could be myself without feeling as if I had to play to somebody's stereotype. And that experience for 4 years, during a very formative 4 years of my life, gave me the strength and confidence to leave here and go out in the world to return to a predominantly white situation with a new sense of self-confidence, so that I could survive at a place like Columbia Law School or Paul Weiss, the firm I'm with now. I became a partner there in 1993. And I have to say, I don't know if I could have had that same level of success had I not gone here and had that experience for 4 years.
Mr. Morris?
Trailblazers, by the way, tend to see life a little differently than those that follow. I'll confide, I can't say this is off the record, the camera's right there. I had an experience once where, after I had been a partner for about 10 years, and we were having our annual outing at a country club in Westchester County. And at the end of the day, we're all having dinner and under these tents. This is my law firm. We're having dinner under these tents. And it's buffet style, like here, and you go and you get your food, and we walked outside under these tents, and I looked and I saw every black associate in the firm, almost every black associate in the firm, was at one table, sitting by themselves. And I said, oh my God. So I sat down next to them so I could integrate the table in at least one respect by being a partner. And then some of my white partners saw what was happening, and they were shocked, and they sat next to us. And the next day, I asked my reaction to that, which I tried to keep to myself, was the message you are sending among your white colleagues is that you're not comfortable with them, and that by extension, you're not comfortable with their clients. And in an integrated environment like a law firm, Michael knows what I'm talking about, that's not necessarily a message you want to send, even in a social setting. So it bothered me, and the next day, I asked one of the associates, why did that happen? And the answer was, well, we don't feel welcome. And we wanted to take the opportunity to mix among themselves. My trailblazer attitude was, well, when I got here, it wasn't enough to fill a table. And every day you walk into this law firm, you are stepping out of your comfort zone. Every single day, every moment you're here, you're stepped out of your comfort zone. And you just have to get used to that if this is the place where you want to succeed.
I'm concerned about time.
But from that moment, I realized that sometimes there's a difference in attitude and outlook between those who came first and those who follow. Yes.
So I'm going to pause there just to make sure I get to all of you. And both of our Clark Atlanta students are consummate activists, both at home and on campus. And so I wondered if you women had another question about the state of the world today for the former secretary.
Sure. So can you help us understand the Rule 42 that the United States is using now as an immigration policy? It's a very, immigration is a contentious topic. So can you help us understand why and how the U.S. is using this particular policy right now?
Immigration is, of all the issues I dealt with in public office, immigration was the most difficult, without a doubt. And I dealt with a lot of difficult issues in public office. As a senior legal official for DOD, Guantanamo, the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Everybody here, I hope, knows what Don't Ask, Don't Tell was. Drone strikes, intelligence oversight, cybersecurity, hurricanes, floods, mudslides, and immigration. Immigration it's a red meat, overheated, over-politicized issue. There are answers to the issue of illegal immigration, but the issue is so politicized, the answers are unobtainable. And I had to manage this problem. I owned this problem for 3 years. And no matter what you do in the immigration space, somebody's going to be mad. And the voices on the extremes are the loudest. I happen to believe that the majority of American people, and this is where I am, believe we should take care of the DACA population. I imagine that there are DACA recipients at the AU Center, students here. We had a summer associate at my law firm this summer. I was editor-in-chief of the Georgetown Law Review, who's a DACA recipient. At my law firm, there are students at Yale Law School who are DACA recipients. They are de facto Americans. Most Americans, I believe that we should take care of the DACA kids and codify the program into law by an act of Congress. And I believe most Americans, and this is where I am, believe that we should give people who've been in this country over 10 years an opportunity to get on a path to citizenship, come out of the shadows, get on the books. But most Americans also believe we need to secure our borders. You cannot have 200,000 a month crossing our southern border. That is an unsustainable number. For perspective, the highest single month I saw in office was May 2014. That was 68,000. And that felt like the world was coming to an end. So enforcing our immigration laws in a fair, humane way, and being fair and humane and compassionate to those who are here are not inconsistent things in my view. Though to strive for that middle ground approach, you'll just make everybody angry at you. And sometimes when everybody's angry at you, maybe that was the right policy approach.
And as you all continue to think about the development of your careers, Mr. Whips, do you have another question about how a career at the Department of Justice or managing Homeland Security is relevant to your future?
Yes, ma'am. So, sir, how exactly does the Department of Homeland Security interconnect with the Department of Defense and just the military as a whole, sir?
Well, I would say constantly, regularly. DHS interacts with the National Guard of the states. DHS includes the Coast Guard. And I had representatives from each of the military services working at DHS headquarters as my liaison. And on any national security issue, DOD and particularly its intelligence collection capabilities are working closely with DHS to keep the homeland safe for national security.
Mr. Morris.
So as the former Secretary of Defense, I'm curious as to your opinion on the January 6th insurrection that happened in the country, and also how does on the January 6th insurrection that happened earlier this year, and what does that mean for not only American democracy, but the safety of all Americans?
So January 6th is something that we should not ever normalize. January 6th was the very definition of an insurrection on the US Capitol. I never in my lifetime thought I would see those images. I never in my lifetime thought I would see a Confederate flag being paraded in the halls of the US Capitol. So we should not ever accept that as just a bunch of tourists who got out of control. It was a violent insurrection. They attacked law enforcement. They attacked a constitutionally required protected function of our democracy. The disappointment is, I've learned from my friends in the Department of Justice, the Title 18, the US Criminal Code, and the federal sentencing guidelines do not adequately prosecute and punish those who engage in an armed insurrection. A lot of these people are being allowed to plead guilty to mere trespass onto federal property and getting probation for this. In my judgment, there ought to be enhanced penalties for engaging in an insurrection during a constitutionally required function of our democracy. They were just attempting to disrupt our democracy, attempting to disrupt a free and fair election. And there have to be serious consequences for that. The word insurrection does not exist anywhere in the United States Code. Maybe it should. But we should not ever get used to the idea that there are a bunch of people that, did some bad things and, they're all heroes. I mean, that's just wrong. It's false.
Ms. Williams, I wondered, Ms. Williams is also applying to law school. If you had a question that was relevant both to the racial relationship and political polarization, and perhaps that feeds off of this question about the insurrection.
Yes, Secretary Johnson. What do you see the role of young African American lawyers, entering this space? How do you see our role in such a racially polarized situation? I know that you spoke that our perspective can be different from trailblazers like yourself. Where do you see us fitting in the future of the law?
That's a good question. So here's the good news. Well, the bad news is that in large national law firms like mine and Michael's, the number of African Americans in these firms has kind of leveled off. It has stopped growing. It's been flat for years. On the other hand, I think part of it is because a lot of African American attorneys are discovering that there's a role in public service, in public office. So over here is Judge Greg Griffin, class of 1980, who's a member of the Alabama State Court, and his son, Greg Griffin Jr., class of 2013, who's an assistant United States attorney in the Middle District of Alabama. And so more and more, I think one of the reasons that Michael and I struggle to recruit African Americans to law firms is because many of us are going into public office, public service, public interest law, and discovering those opportunities, and I think that's a good thing. And I think that's a role we should continue to play.
Mr. Peoples, do you have a question about developing as a Marine?
Yes, sir. How has your time served with the U.S. military?
Sorry, my back's to you.
Sorry. How has your time served with the U.S. military changed or shaped your views during your tenure as Secretary of Homeland Security?
Well, I understand military culture a lot better, and I will never forget some of the extraordinary Americans I met who serve in the U.S. military. My wife and I spent Thanksgiving Day 2010 in Germany at a military hospital. And we were greeting wounded warriors who had been wounded in battle in Afghanistan or Iraq maybe 24, 48 hours before. Their wounds were still fresh in their hospital beds in Germany. They had just come off the battlefield. And what's interesting is that the impulse toward unit cohesion is so powerful that somebody wounded, who's lost a leg, their first impulse is, I got to get back to my buddies in the unit. I got to get back to the unit. How can I get back to the unit? I got to get back in the fight. And then the other is the humility. when I was general counsel of DOD, I used to have an Army officer, I think he was a major, maybe he was a lieutenant colonel, from J2, the intelligence director of the Joint Staff. He'd come up and brief me on counterterrorism issues for about a year. And after he was reassigned, somebody finally told me, you know, that soldier that was briefing you for a year had been on something like 19 deployments. He had lost part of his leg. He broke his back when his parachute failed to open. He's been shot several times. He redeploys, and now he's running triathlons. That's the level of courage and dedication that I would see in the US military over and over again. It was really, really impressive. In all the services, by the way. I know you Marines think you're tough, but in all the services, okay? Okay.
So we just have a couple of more minutes, and I had the pleasure of meeting your wife, Susan, and you when you first arrived here. And if it's appropriate, I'd like you to talk to me a little bit about the think tank that you were telling me about.
Yes,
That is open
yes.
for HBCU recruitment, particularly in the AUC.
Okay, so I'm on the board of directors of several organizations. Let me just take a moment to digress here. I'm on the board of directors of Lockheed Martin, our nation's largest defense contractor, U.S. Steel, Columbia University, the 9/11 Memorial and Museum, WBGO, FM 88.3, based in Newark, New Jersey.
It's real news.
Maybe you know about WBGO. She does. It's jazz. It's a little public radio station that operates on a shoestring, and I'm on their board of directors, and I love that station. They even let me go on the air sometimes myself.
And play
their
records?
music on Saturdays.
Oh,
yes.
fantastic.
Saturdays, it's classic
What time
R&B.
is that?
10 to 2.
Okay,
Next
fantastic.
time I'll be on is December 18th.
Okay, December
10 to 2. I
18th,
was on 2 Saturdays
WBGO.
ago. Anyway, that's my fantasy camp. That's my other life. But anyway, I'm also on the board of directors of a national security think tank in Washington. I forgot Council on Foreign Relations, but also CNAS, the Center for a New American Security. It's a small national security, top-notch think tank in Washington, D.C., devoted to issues of national security. CNAS is dedicated to a more diverse community in national security and is looking for highly dedicated, smart people like the people in this room to intern, which is why I brought you the materials I brought you. I'm promoting CNAS, Center for a New American Security. They have a website, and they're interested in trying to recruit as interns people from the AU Center.
Fantastic. I have a
You all heard that,
small
right?
stack of information that I'm happy to share with you before we leave this morning.
Lots of people ask me, how do I get into national security? How do I get into a career in national security? Well, this is one way to do that.
So I'll share that, but I wanted everyone watching Crown Forum to know to look out for that information or to contact me if you are unable to find it on your own. And just as a final question, what advice would you give to our almost graduates? You indicated that studying while you're here is the most important piece. What's important when you go out into the world from the AUC, prepared to make your mark?
I would say look for good in everyone. You can find good in almost every person you encounter, no matter what race, no matter where they went to school, no matter what their profession is. Look for good in everybody. Treat others like you'd want to be treated. It's a small world. Sometimes you meet the same people going up as you meet going down. You never know who's in a position to help you. Treat everyone like you'd want to be treated. And don't forget where you went to school. Those of you who, like me, graduated Morehouse College, you have a legacy to uphold. And those of us older graduates of this great school look to you to continue the tradition and the legacy and to uphold yourself. Hold yourself out as Morehouse men. and don't disappoint us.
We want to thank you for contacting our president and letting him know that you would be here and that you were willing to engage with students.
A little casual drop by.
We have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, and I anticipate that it will continue. And thank you again, President Thomas, for hosting us this morning. And thank you so much for joining us for Crown Forum.
Thank you.